Hey, can you let me down? In this episode, you can expect us to take out the engine and gearbox, start disassembly of the steering mechanism, as well as we're going to start stabilising the wood structure, just so we can start measuring it. And to be honest, probably a lot more. So, sit tight, grab your popcorn, grab your favourite drink, and let's get into it.
Right, so we've got a new hoist system, rated for 250 kilograms. Should be enough to take the engine out of the Morris. What do you think?
I think it'll do for what we're needing to do with it. It'll definitely help us out a lot with the old Morris, and as well as mine. So hopefully with this episode you'll see us taking out the engine, finally, and probably going to get started on the Moggy as well. Hi! Hello?
It's comfortable?
Oh, it works.
2 hours later.
Hey! Can you let me down?
Right, so after many sleepless nights and countless hours spent on research and joining a couple of clubs and forums, finally I managed to find some information on the structure of Grandpa. So, the most common wood in the UK before the war was ash. It was available in large quantities, it was cheap, and it's quite a strong yet flexible wood. So this is what most of the Morris is made of. All of the pillars and the rails are made of ash. As a fun fact, the front pillars are called the standard pillar and the door is called the shut standard pillar. So the flooring, on the other hand, is made of birch plywood. Our current guess is that it's about 18 millimeters thick, or about 3/4 of an inch. It's quite a strong plywood. It should be fairly easy to source. Not the cheapest. Any part which is not under pressure is made of either pine or whitewood. That's the information we have at the moment, so we'll have to figure out what the actual wood is. Although I guess we can safely use pine since it's a bit easier for us to source. Right, so our current plan of action is to first take some measurements using a caliper. We're going to measure the thicknesses of the wood. This should give us an idea of what we need to purchase, how much we're going to need of it. We're going to try to take measurements of the body. We're going to see how wide the body is based on the driver's side, which currently has the wood fairly intact, which should allow us to map that dimension to the other side, give us an overall width, and that allow us to put in some restraints to make the car symmetrical, make it steady, and make it easy to then put some wood in the places it should be. Once we've done some measurements, whatever wood is salvageable, which mostly is the rear bracket which is holding on the spare wheel, we're going to use a wet wood rot hardener. This is basically going to seep into the wood. It'll create a solid structure within the wood. It does leave a little bit of a shiny finish, but we're not too bothered about that. But it should preserve the wood for years to come. It's quite a quick setting solution. It only takes about 2 hours, and that should give us the peace of mind that no further damage is going to be done to the wood. Once we've done that, our next plan of action is to remove the engine. Removing the engine will provide us with better access to the front bulkhead, which will allow us to measure and replace any wood that we need. That should be a fairly easy process because most of the wood is fairly straight. There's no bends or curves which are going to be difficult like on the back. Then we're going to dismantle the dashboard, and hopefully that should give us a good place to then remove the entire body of the frame. It is an older car, so it is a body on frame design. Basically, the body is held on at the front, just around where the door hinges are, around the back of the door. Those are basically 2 beams running at a 90-degree angle to the main chassis. And there's a third piece of metal around the back, which is attached to the frame and which holds the fuel tank. And that is the third point of contact. So it should be a fairly easy process to take the car off the frame. Once that is done, we'll be free to work on the frame, strengthen anything that needs strengthened, and we're going to then clean it and paint it.
Right, so we're going to get a start on removing the engine and gearbox assembly. I've already kind of started with removing the leads and the distributor cap. We're going to have to unfortunately take out the steering column and steering box, just so we can get past this arm here. So we're going to have to first disconnect the gearbox just to make our life a little bit easier. So we're going to get all the pedals out, all the braces out, we're going to get the shifting arm and the little bracket here off, speedo cable, all the other linkages and whatnot that's kind of attached to the gearbox, and hopefully we can get a look at the clutch that's in this. Once we've got all that out the way, we can remove the engine and actually properly inspect the chassis rails. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Right, so we're going to start off by removing the two braces on either side of the gearbox to kind of get a little bit better access to the pedals here, and also we're going to be moving right to left pretty much. So let's get everything started in this corner. Unfortunately, I do not have a lot of spanners and or sockets, so we are going to have to just kind of make do with a French adjustable spanner. All these bolts were sprayed down with a wee bit of penetrant, some WD-40 penetrating fluid, just to make our lives a little bit easier. So now, that was a nice easy one. We're going to have to move on to this slightly rotten one at the bottom here. So I've had to go underneath the car here just to get to the bolt that's put through the bottom. Thankfully this is nice and loose. So that's number 2. And that's the right brace out the way. Right, so we've managed to get this bar out the way. Now we're going to move on to the pedals. So as you can see here, we currently have 2 pedals, which is your brake and your clutch, on one pivot. And you might be wondering where the third one is, and that is actually here. Now, this is the accelerator, which actually sits right in the middle of these two. And it's a funny little system. It's one up from the Ford Model A's, which you basically had same 3 pedals, but your throttle was on the steering wheel. The brake pedal is actually mechanical, purely mechanical. So there's no hydraulics within this whatsoever. Foot presses on the brake pedal, and this actuates the bar, which goes to a torsion bar. And this has 4 cables attached to it, so 2 for the front, 2 for the back. So we're going to take all this off, and then once we get this linkage disconnected, we're going to move it on to the clutch, and hopefully that will pretty much give us all the room on this side. Right, with this nut off here, the adjusting nut, we're going to move on to removing the preload spring. There it goes. So that just pretty much makes sure that there's tension this way, so that there's no slop on the cable. All that's really left is this cotter pin. We're just going to bend out the way. All of the hardware will be replaced once putting it back together, but better to keep it for the time being. No washers underneath here, and there's our whole assembly. Brake rod, which is actually, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but it's a little tiny bit bent. So we're going to put all this back together with our washers. I'll show you how that looks. So here we have the pin, a washer, and the cotter pin. And just for safety, we're going to reinstall that as well. So now moving on to the whole assembly here at the bottom. We have a cotter pin here, which we're going to have to bend out the way. I'm a mechanic in my day job, and I will say that we see countless vehicles actually at the factory with these cotter pins, and vehicles that could be 2 or 3 years old, and you'll be fighting for a long time to get these pins out. And even this pin possibly being the original cotter pin that was installed from the factory, it still comes out without a bother. A little bit of surface rust, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but still I would not mind using this again if really needed. Next thing is the preload spring, which is attached to the pedal, and with a little bracket on the other side. And while I'm down here, I will remove the clutch pedal spring as well. So now this will come out nice and easy. Oh, I've actually ran into a small issue. We're gonna have to remove this bracket here. So we've got a little helper here as well, so she's gonna start taking apart the other side for me, make my life easier. So Sophie, what you're gonna do to get this linkage out, you're gonna start off with the little nut at the bottom here. Once you've got that out and put it to the side following with a spring, you're going to take out this little wing nut off. And you're just going to unscrew it until it comes right off. And then, once you've done that, we're going to move up to the handbrake lever, which is up here. And I'm going to have a look. So, you see that little pin? You're going to get the pliers, you're going to straighten out the 2 little legs and you're going to push it through the other way. So nice and simple for you. So while Sophie's taking that off, I'm going to continue on with this assembly. I'm going to take off this little bracket that holds the brake pedal in place. And again, thankfully, a car that's almost 100 years old and just everything comes off without issue pretty much. I'm going to have to grab the other side. Right, I've managed to take that nut off, and this is actually the pin that goes through that hole right there. And as you can see, it is tapered. So I've had to heat it up a wee bit just so I can get it out, but that's a little bit of a closer look. This should move without moving the shaft. So hopefully just wiggling this off now. It's almost there. There we go. So that's inside the hole. So as you can see, the taper pretty much, maybe you can see, and that's the other side. So that's the two pedals out the way. Right, so with that all out the way, we're gonna continue on. Sophie's currently getting the handbrake mechanism all disassembled off the gearbox to make it nice and easy for us. I'm gonna move on to the starter button and shifter lever. So thankfully it's nice and simple for me. One bolt just behind here, which is 7/16, and 3 flathead screws. So let's get this off. It is a little bit tight. So that's one of the screws out, and then just these 3. So what currently Robert's doing is actually taking off the exhaust. Kind of boring stuff, so we're not going to really show too much of it. But if I crawl underneath on my little buggy, so that's what Robert's trying to do. Right, so Sophie's tried to take this off. Done a good job, I will say. But I've noticed that this will not actually come off, and that is because someone has either broke this at some point and basically filed this down and peened the outside of the shaft that this rotates on. So I'd need to actually physically grind this away. So this is something that we're going to have to review once the gearbox is out and once the gearbox is going under renovation. So we're going to have to replace that pin, because what this should be, it should stick out a little further. So there's a hole and a cotter pin, same as for the clutch assembly, well, the clutch pin. So currently this is going to just have to sit here. It's not really too much in the way with it sitting here. We'll still be able to grab the gearbox and take it out. So I've managed to remove the nut down here and the 3 bolts. So we're going to pretty much just move this and take this out, and we're going to just move it aside for the time being. Right, so same thing on this side as the other side. Thankfully, again, it's been covered in grease and oil, so the threads weren't too rusty, so I can just kind of take it off by hand, which is a huge plus for me. So with that off, I'm going to put the bolt just aside, and I'm going to move on to the top one. Now, I'll zoom in on the top nut. So this is the top nut for the brace here, and as you can see, it's a square, pretty much. Now, the majority of the original fastenings should have been squares, and that's just periodically correct. Guarantees some of them are original hex as well, like on the gearbox and whatnot. But we're suspecting that a lot has already been replaced at some point in time. With that one off, let's get to the back. So the only real positive of it being a square is I don't need to hold it on the other side, but I will need to heat this one up a little bit. Right, so we're going to have to heat this up very carefully as not to burn the wood. Short bursts, that should do it, hopefully. So the gas that we're using is actually MAP gas, MAPP. I'm going to have to get someone to hold the other side now. This is one of those weird sizes that's not quite 7/16, but it just kind of goes on. So that brace should come off quite nicely now. So now, in theory, all we've got left is the speedo cable, which should be quite easy to come off, and ready to take the gearbox out.
As we do not want to bore you with the long fight to get all of the screws removed in order to take the gearbox off, we've compressed the long video into a short time lapse. The whole gearbox was held on to the engine with 8 screws, which required a bit of encouragement to come out. And here's the clutch mechanism to engage and disengage the gearbox. Overall, the clutch plate is in a great condition for its age.
Right, so we've managed to get the box out without any issues. Funny enough, all the bolts were a little bit loose, but that's not an issue for our case because this isn't going to go on the road anytime soon. So, with this gearbox out, we can assess the clutch mechanism and also pretty much the box itself. So first thing that I did notice is we do have a very slight leak. It's just a little bit wet. So that's all right, but we know the seal is gone. We know the... I don't know if you'll be able to hear that actually. So the main input bearing is a little bit knackered. Again, full renovation for this box, gears and all. But also, with this out, we can actually move on to removing this engine without any issues. Funny enough, we did drop, well, not drop, but we did have a little bit of a hiccup with this box actually turning over. But as a good positive, this is the colour of the oil that we've managed to get out of it. So as a good positive, it's nice and clean. It doesn't actually smell, well, it smells like gear oil, but that's about it. And that's what you want to see. So we know that oil was good. We most likely know that all the gears are going to be good in this as well. You will see a later on video of us actually stripping this down, giving it a clean, and as well as the clutch assembly. We don't actually know the extent of the clutch, if that's worn out and about to go, or whether it's like brand new. We're going to have to take that off once the engine's out. But I think we're going to get cracking and get this engine out before it gets dark. Right, so to effectively remove this engine, it's pretty much 4 bolts. Nothing more, nothing less. We could have really left the gearbox on, but just because of what we're doing, we want to make it as easy as we possibly can. So by removing the gearbox, we can just lift this engine out pretty much. So there's 2 bolts at the front and 2 bolts at the back. So the 2 bolts at the back are actually part of the back plate for the engine, which is quite nice. So we can just take those 2 out, 2 front, and then hopefully lift it out. Now, we were thinking as well, we might possibly need to remove the steering box and the steering column, but in reality, with a little bit of looking and measuring with our eyes, we don't actually need to do that. We are going to be taking out the distributor just so we do not damage it, because if we do damage it, it might be a little bit longer of a wait to actually get a new one or a used one, since, well, parts for this aren't readily available. So let's get that gone, let's get the 4 bolts out, and hopefully lift this engine out. Okay, hold on.
It's a bit fast.
Okay. Wait. Hold on. So you have ran into an issue.
Okay.
Okay, up. Hold on.
Right, slide it forwards.
They're still catching. Up. Up. Up.
Cleared.
Up. Right, slide the engine, slide the whole car back. Car back. Slide it back. Up, up, up. Okay. Okay. Slide the.
Andrew.
Oh, what's it catching? Nothing. It just wants to spin.
No, yes. Oil.
Oh. Ow, my foot. Right. That's. Can you put it down a little bit? Just a touch. Okay. Yep, that's enough. Right, I'm gonna need a rag because this is gonna piss out oil. I'm gonna need a rag. Oh, that's fine. Cool. Right, so that's that. Let's push this back. Right. Start putting it down. Keep going down. Keep going. Keep going. Right, now we need to put blocks under us. Two will do. So, one there. And okay, lower it. And we'll just grab it by a strap. Right. And that is how not to remove an engine professionally. But we done it. Okay. Okay. Right, so we're going. Hi there. The grandfather. Okay. Getting all the rust in my boot. Thanks.